everybody. Welcome to the County Seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth. We're bringing you our show today from the Capitol in the Senate building. We're having a discussion about a bill that kind of popped up on the radar and is of great concern to many of the more rural counties across the state. It's Senate Bill 42, and it has to do with shifting away from personal property tax and taking that tax burden and repackaging it to real property tax or real estate tax. And a lot of people don't think that that is a big issue, but as we will find out in the course of the show, it is. So some of you may be asking the question, well, what the heck is personal property tax? Well, if you've ever owned a small business, you know, and we're going to explain it to you.
You know the old saying, money doesn't grow on trees? So where does a county get the money they need to fix roads, keep police on the street, make sure water runs out of your tap, and provide a park for the kids to play in? It all comes from taxes of some sort or another. There are all kinds of tax we directly or indirectly pay for to get government services. But the primary source for local government is property tax, with school districts getting the biggest chunk of it. Property tax is an ad valorem tax, which means it's based on the fair market value of the property being taxed. This requires an annual assessment of the value of the property. That's the job of the county assessor. The assessor bases his tax as a percentage of the value expressed in increments of mills. While a penny is 1/100th of a dollar, a mill is 1/1000th of a dollar. It's important to note that Utah operates under a system known as truth in taxation, which means that the county or government unit levying the tax will get the same amount of money each year. So if your property value goes up, your tax rate goes down. Counties have to hold hearings to adjust their tax revenue and cannot benefit directly from the value of your property increasing or decreasing. There are four broad types of property taxes. They are land, improvements to land, both of which would include immovable man-made objects such as buildings, walls, and such, personal property, which would include movable man-made objects, and finally intangible or real property, which is a combination of land and improvements. Property tax is further divided into classes, such as residential, commercial, greenbelt, and so on. Certain classes of property pay different rates relative to the mill levy. As an example, if you live in your house, your property is classified as residential, and you get a 40% break on your tax rate. Personal property tax is levied on things that can move with you, such as office equipment, machinery, and furnishings. Generally, personal property value is based upon the cost of the equipment and the things needed to make it work in the year it was purchased. Things that are taxed include vehicles, planes, boats, business and manufacturing equipment, whether it's purchased or leased, as well as supplies used in conducting business, such as paper, shipping, supplies, janitorial and maintenance supplies, even that single quart of oil you keep on hand. Items of personal property that are exempt from property tax may include merchandise inventory that a company keeps on hand to sell, farm machinery and equipment used in the direct growth of agricultural products, livestock, household furnishings, and other personal property that has an aggregate value of $10,800 or less. There is currently a bill under consideration that will exempt most all personal property tax and shift that tax burden to real property. While it is argued that this shift would not have an impact on county taxes and would be more fair, not all counties agree, and that is where our conversation will start today on the County Seat. I'm Joe Davis.
So now you have an idea of what personal property tax is. When we come back, we'll pick up a conversation, find out what impact this bill will actually have on the ground in Utah's counties. We'll be right back.
All local products have a story of magical places, real people, and delicious recipes spanning generations. So go ahead and discover flavors you've never tasted and friends you never knew you had. Utah's own Discover Local Food.
In our world, the sun shines on high adventure and New experiences are yours for the taking. And everything in you looking to play outside the box. Cedar City, it's time to play.
Utah has a national treasure where winding canyons stretch to the horizon, where nature forms elegant structures, and where iconic monuments of the West stand tall. Visitors around the world come to get a glimpse of southern Utah's legendary landscape and landmarks. Join them and explore San Juan County, Utah's Canyon Country.
The Utah Farm Bureau began as a collection of farmers supporting each other to raise the food we enjoy. Today, Farm Bureau membership encompasses everyone, whether ranchers, growers, or just everyday folks like you and me. Members enjoy discounts on items like vehicles and ATVs, or insurance that's very affordable. You don't have to be a farmer to join, and dues are small, but together we make a big difference in keeping our food supply local and abundant. Join Utah Farm Bureau.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are continuing our conversation about Senate Bill 42, which will make a big shift in how property taxes are collected, shifting from personal property taxes as part of the revenue stream for Utah's counties and moving it all over to real property. Joining us for the conversation about this bill is John Ulibarri, who is the assessor from Weber County, and Commissioner Mike Dalton, who is commissioner from Beaver County. Gentlemen, thank you for taking time out of this busy day for this conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so when I first at the UAC meeting heard the conversation about this bill, I went, okay, that doesn't seem like a big deal, you know? I might be paying a little more on my property tax, but I'm a person who does pay personal property tax with the business. I go through every year, I fill out a form, I tell them how much inventory of stuff I have, send it off to the county, and it's done. What's so hard about removing that and shifting it over to real property? What kind of impact are we talking about here?
Well, in Beaver County, it's a huge impact because all of our solar farms are locally assessed. They are all considered personal property, and that tax amount that we collect off of those solar farms would have to be shifted to the homeowners and the other business owners on real property taxes. We have established RDAs that have tax increment financing, and the businesses are going to lose that tax increment financing because they're not going to pay any tax, so they're not going to get any tax back.
So, I mean, one would obviously think on something like this that, okay, well, you're not paying for the solar panels, but now that's added to the property value of the land it sits on. Is that not how that works?
That's not how it works at all. So the two are valued independent of each other. Business personal property is based on an acquisition value, and then it's depreciated over the life of the equipment. Where real property is based on its actual market value. What would a reasonable person pay to acquire that property, and what would a reasonable person pay to sell that property or sell the property for? So they're two different things, and they're valued differently. And so what this bill potentially does, again, is has the potential to create a rather large shift from business personal property to real property owners. As a matter of fact, in Beaver County, it will be several $100s on a $250,000 home, with no benefit to the property owner directly in increased services.
So, what was the motivation behind this bill? I mean, I go out and I buy a couple of computers, and you know, it's it's annoying when I think, well, I have to write down all my boxes of paper clips and my reams of paper and stuff like that, and that I'm being taxed on something that I'm not going to make any money off of, and it's going to be consumed during the course of the year. Computers, I kind of get more. Office furniture, they have a life. They create value to your business. So I kind of see that point. But what was the motivation for the bill? Do either of you have any clue?
Well, the narrative for the bill is certainly double taxation. And so in your business, you purchase property, paper clips, computers, things like that, and you pay a sales tax. But then every year you have to fill out a rendition and send it into the county assessor's office, and you're paying a property tax on that. Again, the idea is to eliminate that supposed double taxation.
Well, okay, so on the surface, I would look at that and I'd go, yeah, I guess it is double taxation. Is this unique? Is this a double jeopardy that doesn't exist anywhere else?
No, it is not a double jeopardy. Every stick, every nail, every piece of carpet, every appliance that goes into your house, you pay sales tax on. Therefore, but you also pay property tax every year, although it is based and assessed differently than personal property. But that same property is taxed when you buy it, and then taxed for its life.
So quite frankly, I guess when I go to the county, I get a building permit to do a renovation on the property. Then I dump $20,000–$30,000 into a new kitchen. The assessor comes by, they reassess the property, and all of a sudden the value goes up. And so that's not to try and get people not to take out building permits or anything, but I mean that's kind of what we're doing on the real property.
That's exactly what we do on the real property side.
So are there any other examples of where supposedly there's double taxation?
Well, I guess you're licensing on your cars.
Yeah.
Or I mean, they don't call it tax anymore. They call it a licensing fee, but that fee took the place of the property tax that you used to pay on your car. And you definitely pay sales tax on the car. Yes. You pay sales tax on your four-wheeler, ATV, UTV, your boat, your house trailer. Then you pay a fee to license, which used to be a tax. So in my estimation, that is still, it's not called a tax, but it's still double taxation.
Well, I think this is a very interesting point. I'd like to kind of take a look at what the impact of this bill will be and how it, and the mechanism by how it shortchanges people. And we'll do that right when we come back here on the county seat.
My daughter and I had just finished a run at this place called Eagle Point. It's this really cool but kind of challenging ski resort that has a real family feel to it. She was so excited because she beat me down the run. Deja vu. I saw myself as a kid out skiing my mom. It was a big moment for me. And all of a sudden it hit me. I was making the same memories for her.
Beaver County, Utah. Make it more than a vacation.
There's a little place on a Utah map where I was raised, where my heart's at, where the sagebrush grows wild and high, and the stars come out at night. Oh, there ain't nothing like being raised in the basin with a Ute reservation, skiing starvation, that Duchesne County life.
All the traveling that I've done over the world, I'd still rate this locale as being one of the best.
This is some of the most scenic country out there. And part of the appeal for Kanab is it's a small town. It's beautiful. People are very friendly.
It's just been awe-inspiring.
You just couldn't find a nicer place to come.
Welcome back to the county seat. We're having a conversation about Senate Bill 42 making its way through the state right now, and we've kind of understand now the motivation. We have a little bit of an impact or an idea of the impact it's going to have. I would like to pick up the conversation and just try and make a couple of case site examples of how big of an impact this is going to be. You're from a Class 2 county.
Yes.
You're from a Class 5 county.
Yes.
So we've got pretty good sized county and we got a pretty small county. And yet both of you are going to see a huge negative impact from this, even though the fiscal note says that it's almost a wash. How does that work? Give me an example of how much that's going to hit the revenue for either one of your counties.
It's actually revenue neutral because the way Utah's tax system is set up, the rate floats in inverse proportion to the taxable value. And so the entities will all receive the same amount of money. At issue is really the tax shift from the business commercial property onto the real property. And so, for instance, in Beaver County, in Weber County, there's a shift. The shift is not nearly as dramatic as it will be for Beaver County. Using the information that we received from the state so far, if there's a 70% loss in business personal property value in Beaver County, it will cost almost $800. It will shift that property tax burden, almost $800 from the business personal property onto the real property owners for a $250,000 residence. It will be almost twice that for a commercial property that doesn't receive the residential exemption.
I was going to say, so it's not, it affects every household, not just the ones who are releasing their burden from personal property tax because they're a business or commercial property over everybody. It's $800 across the board for the entire household base for Weber County.
Well, no, for Beaver County.
For Beaver County.
For Beaver County.
But $1,600 approximately for every real property that's commercial.
Yes.
Because you got to take it, not quite $1,600, but the house, the residential house, gets a 45% tax break on the primary residence. So the commercial is almost double what a house would see, the raise.
That would literally be the case because I'm looking at, if I had applied it to Salt Lake County, I'd pay about $3,200 on my property tax for my commercial real estate. And so if that, and that across 2 units, so if I take those 2 units, double them by $1,600, then I'm up to $6,000. That does become that these guys running these cameras, that's their pay raise.
Yeah. But that's per $250,000 worth of valuation. If your valuation is higher than $250,000, that raise is going to be substantially more than the $1,600.
So to be clear, Beaver County is still, because of truth in taxation and the form of the floating tax rate, you're still going to get your budget that you normally get for operating the school districts in the county and all those different things.
The only change is what figure who puts on their check.
Okay.
We're going to get the same amount of money. It just, who writes out the check is going to be the different person, or how much money they put on the check is going to be different.
So this kind of raises an entirely different issue, though, that is kind of related to this because you know, not too long ago we did a show on tax incentives for businesses to develop and go into communities, and where you start looking at all those packages like, you know, RDAs and things like that. There are tax incremental breaks that are given to businesses. Is that based on their real property? Is that based on personal property? I mean, somehow or another, that has an effect on that.
That's based on the difference between what it was assessed at before the project was built and what it's assessed at after the project is built. So, for example, a tax increment financing, we sign an agreement with a developer. We agree to give them 30% of the tax they pay as tax incentive to build in our county, and they get that back to help pay for their infrastructure. If they don't pay that personal property, which they budgeted out for 20, 30 years,
right.
If they don't pay property taxes, there's not going to be any money for them to get back, and so the next solar farm, the next geothermal plant, the next large item that comes into Beaver County, we are not going to be able to offer them a tax incentive because they won't pay any taxes, which may be I mean, that may be offset, but all of them are coming in asking for tax incentive financing.
Isn't that pretty much standard operating procedure
I
anymore?
believe it is.
I mean, Juab County went through a big paper plant that they didn't quite get enough incentive package put together, and they lost it. So I see that as being a big issue. We're going to take one more break. We'll come back for one more segment. I've still got some questions to ask about this. The cloud's starting to clear, but it still looks like it's going to be raining. We'll be back here on the county seat.
There are meetings, and then there are gatherings. At the Davis Conference Center, we know the difference. Turn your event into something more than just another business summit. With over 70,000 square feet of flexible meeting space, state-of-the-art presentation amenities, and inspiring architecture, the Davis Conference Center is designed to deliver stellar results in a majestic setting. Take your convention to the next level. Schedule now at davisconferencecenter.com.
Years in the making, dinosaurs once roamed this land. Now they're found at the Dinosaur National Monument. Let's take you beyond the bones. We call it Dinosaur Land. You'll find it offers adventures and sights not seen anywhere else in the world. Come to Dinosaur Land, Vernal, Utah. You'll want to stay forever. The dinosaurs did.
In a place that is beyond words, there is nothing to be said, except take your time in Bryce Canyon country.
Welcome back to the county seat, talking about Senate Bill 42 and the elimination of personal property tax on businesses and shifting it over to real property values. So where does centrally assessed fit in this whole thing? Because there's already a challenge to counties with centrally assessed taxes because they don't get to set the rates, and there are always challenges. You guys find yourselves constantly trying to, take on Union Pacific or Utah Power, all these different utilities that challenge the value of the property that's within your county. So what is this going to do to that?
Well, they're actually, from what we understand, they've been carved out of the bill. So this bill is now narrowed down strictly to locally assessed business personal property. What I suspect, and this is just me talking, that this is, and I'm certainly not a legal scholar here, but what I suspect may happen is these large centrally assessed companies will come back and say, well, wait a minute, we have business commercial property as well. Why aren't we included in this? We're being treated unequally. And so they may have a case that they could take before the state tax commissioner and all the way up through the state Supreme Court to say, well, look, we're suing based on disparate treatment. We should also receive this exemption.
So how would the counties respond to that? I mean, you'd have to challenge that if they brought it.
We would definitely have to challenge that. We challenge centrally assessed litigation almost daily. There's always a case going on where a centrally assessed party is suing or challenging the valuation that the state tax commission gives on them. We have to defend it, and this would just open the door and give the centrally assessed businesses more opportunity to challenge the assessment.
I mean, doesn't this already put stress on a rural county or a heavily centrally, and both of you guys, I mean, you've got railroads all over
we have a couple railroads in Weber County, yes.
So I was thinking to say centrally assessed, but it is probably a pretty big deal, but it seems to me that that's already putting a burden on the other real property owners. Every time somebody comes in and challenges it, and they don't challenge it with you, they challenge it with the state, and the state writes it off. So isn't that already putting pressure on, you know, a utility comes in, a big company, they're centrally assessed, they're an airline, whatever. They put all the stuff on the ground, and then they start ratcheting, saying, well, it's not worth what you think it's worth or what anybody thinks it's worth. That's already pressure, right?
Yes. Well, and the pressure that it creates is not necessarily financial to the different entities because of the floating tax rate. We still receive the same amount of money, but it is a transfer of the tax burden onto all of the other property owners.
I was going to say, it's a burden on the voters who expect you guys to look out for their interests.
However, it could be a burden to the tax collecting entity, because if they wait 3 to 5 years to challenge it, they win, you have to pay them back the 3 to 5 year taxes, not just the current tax. You have to pay them back the back taxes. And then you then the taxing entities, and the school board does that a lot, they do a levy. What's that levy called, John?
I can't remember off the top of my head now.
Anyway, it's a special levy.
It's a judgment levy.
Yeah, a judgment levy that they can add to the tax rate and actually increase their tax without having to do the TNT, I believe.
That's true. And it also creates additional pressure on legislative bodies, because at some point the citizens are going to come back and say, look, we can't afford to pay this much in property tax. You need to make a decision. You need to reduce the revenue that your entity receives, and that means a cut in services. And so I suspect in Beaver County, you know, the Beaver County Commission, let's say, would have to make a decision. Well, all right, where do we want to cut? Do we want to cut public safety? Do we want to cut any type of services on our roads? The school district would have to say, well, where are we going to reduce? We're going to reduce the number of teachers. You know, we're going to increase class sizes, or we're going to stop buying books. Those are the types of pressures that these entities...
But every time an entity does that, then the newspapers and the community says, oh, you're just trying to scare us. You're just threatening us with reductions in teachers and everything else. And it's not really a scare tactic. It becomes a reality, I would presume.
It is a reality.
It's a very big reality. The one thing that in Beaver County School District gets 70% of every dollar that we collect. That's a heck of a lot of money for them to make up.
We have just a few seconds left in this conversation, but it leads me to one more question. Do you see, if this were to pass and it were to be enforced to a point where you might start losing residents in your county because of it, because they can't afford the property tax to live there?
Absolutely. No question about it.
Could this blight your county?
Yes, it could.
Yeah.
Our county.
What about you?
I don't know. Quite frankly, the impact on Weber County won't be nearly as severe as the centrally assessed counties, but a reduction in services is always difficult for citizens to take, and they have options to move.
I was going to say, if companies may not come into town based on the fact that employees would be paying so much.
Yes.
Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Thank you for tuning in every week. You know, these issues are really, genuinely very important to you and your family, your friends, and your neighborhoods. And if you don't get engaged, if you don't happen to watch them, you can't be part of the dialogue that leads to their solution. So make a point to watch the County Seat, share it with your friends on social media, start some conversation about it. We welcome it, and we will see you next week on the County Seat.